We are back. Barbara, what did you make of the film?
I actually really liked the film. I loved how Jenna Sutula invited us to take part in maybe the perspective or the habitat of a bacteria. That was kind of interesting.
Yeah, and at the same time for like mixing, neural networks and bacteria, and also collaborating. I mean, the work is collaborative, come out of a collaboration or like advice by different scientific institutions, bioscientists and programmers were on that work, if I understand it correctly. So it looks also like the kind of way of working that we might be looking for here in building, kind of future prototypes.
Yeah, I think it ties beautifully the end of the first section that we just had with this beautiful panel. It ties it really well to this next section, which is going to be about habitat. Yeah, so I don't know if Moritz can hear us, but we're already in the habitat slide, so that's great, wonderful.
So now you're also in the habitat.
Oh, nice, wonderful. So meaning the natural environment, we want to ask, where do we live? Who do we live with? What do we live from? And how do we build a common ground?
So this session on habitat really builds on the ZKM exhibition Critical Zones, showing us that one way to face the critical situations of the Earth is to engage with our habitat from different perspectives. The notion of critical zones might help us to change pace, as Daria Miller pointed out yesterday, referring to the unimaginably thin, fragile, and highly complex layer of life on our planet. What happens if we understand Earth as a network of critical zones, she asked, and that very much speaks to this session.
Right, and also keeping Jenna Sutula's Bacillus subtilis natto in mind, we will explore these questions together with a live panel discussion moderated by my dear ZKM colleague Sabine Faller, with Frédéric Aitouati, Guillaume Pitron, and Alexandre Monin. And remember that, again, all your questions and comments matter to us, so you can just put them in the Telegram chat, and this time it will be me trying to voice them into the discussion. So thank you already for your lively input.
That being said, let's meet Julijonas Urbonas, artist, designer, and engineer with a background in amusement park development. So that's highly promising.
Yeah, and we will begin this second section with a conversation between him and the director of the Karlsruhe University of Art and Design, Jan Boelen, which will end then with a short performance by Julijonas, which I'm really looking forward to. And then we'll have maybe a quick 10 minutes break and be back directly in the live discussion panel with Sabine. So Moritz, take it away to Julijonas Urbonas and Jan Boelen.
So we are here together with Julijonas Urbonas. He is a Lithuanian artist, designer, and we are working together on Planet of People, an installation that will be presented in the Venice Architecture Biennial next year. What is Planet of People, Julijonas?
Well, simply put, actually it could be defined as an artistic and scientific feasibility study of a planet made of human bodies, as well as a thought experiment, what it would be like to make a planet of human bodies.
Why is at this moment it important to talk about Planet of People, and why this kind of installation? There is certainly a crisis of imagination, but how do you see your project itself, and what could it contribute to the discussions that are ongoing today?
Well, it could be seen from quite a few perspectives. I would say I would mention aesthetic, political, and ethical perspectives that are quite important in this project. Aesthetically, it has something to do that you have already mentioned, this kind of a crisis of imagination. And it is not something that was specifically designed for this particular crisis, but it has been my own practice that has been always aimed at pushing imagination to the extreme. And in this particular context, it's important to mention the term cosmic imagination. Imagination that is liberated from terrestrial bias. Also looking at ourselves from a perspective of an alien. And in the context of architectural Biennale, I'm specifically interested in how can you change the perspective from human as the center of architecture, kind of Vitruvian architecture, to the perspective of habitat without humans, or humans without habitat. Something that could be seen as Vitruvian, kind of inverse engineering of Vitruvian architecture. Also, it has something to do with this current apocalyptical age, or eschatological age, that we've been imagining and thinking about all kind of apocalyptical scenarios that are quite a few. You can see in all kind of channels that we are rehearsing apocalypse in all possible ways. But when you think about survival plans, there are just very few. And within these very few, there is nothing but the escape. You know, Noah's Ark kind of ideas, colonizing our planets, setting up all kind of habitats elsewhere and so on. And within these scenarios, there is nothing just the replicas of human history or earthlings, habitat of earthlings, as though we have been too much earthlings. It's as though it's impossible to get rid of our earthly gravitational origins. Someone suggesting to get rid of this kind of terrestrial bias of thinking imagination and to imagine something completely different, radical different. So Planet of People is a thought experiment that would allow us to imagine something that is habitat without humans, or humans without habitat.
Good.
And when you think about ethics, you could see that we've been living in this particular time when the term Anthropocene has been established and made us aware that we cannot talk about climate change, crisis without involving space, because other planets, as well electromagnetic environment has been shaping and forming our climate. So how do we involve these topics as well as space trash into the conversations about our earthly habitat and so on and so on? So one way of looking at that is just getting rid of these grand stories of colonization, because we would trash other planets as we are trashing our planet, I think. So one way to be more responsible and think more sensitively about maybe I would say far future of human beings in space is to think about a planet made of ourselves, either metaphorically or literally.
Julijonas, you're talking about this prototype. How would that function in space itself, in Lithuanian Space Agency? How could people that watch now become in the future be part of your big experiment? How could they build this extraterrestrial celestial body, and how could they be part of another planet itself?
Okay, first and foremost, as you may have already noticed, it's quite a fictional project. Even though the scientific background is real, it probably would work, because we've been working.
How it would work?
You
calculated it?
So scientifically it would work. But you should know one thing, which is quite absurd. It would take around 1 trillion years to have such a biomass of human bodies in outer space with a current birth rate of our planet to make this planet. So we're so little, so tiny. So logistically, it's quite impossible. But it is quite real and feasible in terms of its being as a kind of quasi-real project. It's what I mean by that. It's scientifically, it's quite feasible in a way. On the other hand, it's quite not real because, again, of logistical issues. But what is also quite real, it is that you can put anybody in these kind of circumstances of floating in midair and imagine what it would be like to, for example, choose your own choreographical posture to monumentalize yourself for eternity. So we've been working of hybrid kind of means of communication and artistic research. So where people could be put in artistic kind of theatrical circumstances and would imagine extraterrestrially, imagine themselves being stripped of all the social, economical, political constructs that defines us as earthlings, as well as being stripped of gravitational kind of origins, and put yourself as a new being, as kind of, I would say, as a brick, as a biological brick for the extraterrestrial biological composition. But one of the objects that is quite at the core of the narrative, it is a 3D scanner where you could scan yourself, and all of
a bit like in the airports that you have, like
whatever,
at the airport.
Whatever, it's up to you to decide. But what is important that you can see yourself in astrophysical simulation, and you can control with your choreographical posture what kind of planetary body could be built just by the way you involve yourself extraterrestrially choreographically in there. So it's in a way, we are working on an empathetic link with yourself and alien yourself, the alien yourself. Yeah, on the other hand, we've been working on all kind of feasibility studies, a quite diverse group of thinkers, practitioners working in space or with topics in there. They've been giving all kinds of calculations, some thorough opinions, and essays, articles on this particular idea. So in a way, it's kind of quasi-artistic, quasi-scientific project that allows you to put yourself in this kind of potential reality where Lithuanian Space Agency builds its own, I would say Lithuanian Space Agency kind of, that would be that universe, space agency of Earth. Yeah. All human beings would be involved and they would be sent in Lagrangian points, by the way, where you would be
Lithuanian Space Agency is maybe not about space, it's about Earth more than it's about space itself. Yeah.
But it considers the question of how such small countries that don't have technical, scientific and other resources to catapult human bodies in outer space. But on the other hand, first of all, we have to notice that there is probably any country now that wouldn't have any space program. So we have lots of countries that don't have its own resources to catapult bodies into outer space, but still they're working on space programs. So in this particular case, how do we kind of, I wouldn't say compete with mega countries like US and Russia, who have quite the resources. How do we of ourselves in this so-called space culture without copying, without replicating what Americans and Russians do. Because we look into the narratives that are circulating around, we are mostly generated by Russians and Americans that have lots of historical references, mostly colonization and so on. So we as Lithuanians and other smaller countries, we forget that by replicating the ideas of colonizing other planets, we forget the mistakes of human history. And also we're not becoming also Lithuanians, we just become Americans. So in a way, we are also not so much dealing with our own identity in outer space, kind of our alien, extraterrestrial identity. So one of the aims of Lithuanian Space Agency is also to think about Lithuanian space identity, and agency as well.
So what you are telling, or what you are trying to say with about this very important comment on identity politics of today is that you with your project are announcing a new space age itself. Is that correct, or am I too ambitious in the announcement of that?
Yeah, you may say that the project taps into the questions of new kind of policies that govern space exploration and exploitation. But first of all, we have to be aware that we already live in so-called new space age, or space age 2, which has been defined by the establishment of astroeconomics, the term Astro-Anthropocene, as well as, probably it's my insight, increased interest from humanities and arts in the topics of space. So we've got the establishment of astro arts, for example, and astro humanities like astroanthropology, astropolitics, astroethics, and so on. So I kind of try to attune our social imagination, and particular architectural imagination, to this new kind of space age, as well as to think about something that would go beyond this age of still age that is privatized and commercialized. So how it could be democratized in such a way that space would be open for everybody, and not only human beings, as well as non-human beings and non-living beings.
So later in the festival, Jonas, we will also see another experiment of you, an experiment that is also part of your larger research on gravity, and therefore is also part of the ideas around Planet of People. Can you elaborate a little bit on this experiment that you made?
It is a specific kind of strategy that I've been developing for all my projects. It's almost like a meta project or backup project that is always within any project I do. It is projects that would be kind of conducted or realized without any technologies. If I always imagine, what if all of a sudden the technologies I use in my projects would become absent, they would just disappear? How I would compensate the lack of these technologies with human resources? So I thought, how actually I could, in this particular project, Planet of People, I already don't have technologies to send human beings to outer space. How I would kind of simulate or rehearse this space program with human resources. So I thought what would take if I had around 10 bodies, 10 people, and would need to simulate Planet of People, the formation of Planet of People. So I came up with this performative strategy to to simulate certain movements of the bodies that would be possible in outer space, as well as simulating the relationship, a gravitational relationship between each of the body. So in my performance, the bodies are suspended, held by other men. People are holding people, but those people who are holding, the holders, the supporters, they have to imagine themselves being as kind of weightlessness itself. It's super difficult, but after certain rehearsals, you can see that those people, usually strong men, they imagine what would happen if I move my hand this and that, what would happen if I all of a sudden become embryo. They have to, in real time, to respond to the specifics of weightlessness environment. So kind of human-based simulator of weightlessness, and specifically referring to the project, A Planet of People. So no technologies, then just human beings.
Okay. Julijonas, I have a last question. I would like that you tell a little bit about the collaboration with Pointer Studio. They are quite essential for the project and what they did and what they developed together with you. What did they develop, and how is that part of the installation Planet of People?
It is something that I've already mentioned, the scanner and the simulation. We've been working together to program the interface between the subject, human being, and the astrophysics simulation, the interaction between the physical being and virtual being, how a person being scanned and catapulted in astrophysics simulation could imagine him or herself in such a way that they would be kind of provoked to forget their terrestrial bias, terrestrial imagination and thinking. So we've been working with aesthetics, with interaction design, and specific software that involves hardcore astrophysics calculations and so on, as well as certain things that would allow us to forget how to say, the kind of terrestrial origins of technologies, how to make it ultimately extraterrestrial. So for example, that's why you can see in this particular sketch, which is based on Brownian motion choreography. I wouldn't go deep into that, but it's kind of specific astrophysical as well as molecular choreography applied to the human bodies. And you can see that all the bodies are colorful. We don't want to have human bodies that would have certain color. So we want to have a maximum diversity of human beings. But the only thing you can see it's that we also have lots of different kind of shapes of bodies, obese, amputees, little and big. So this is something that we've been discussing with Pointer Studio and making into hybrid narrative, interactive hybrid narrative.
Good, thank you, Julijonas. We are looking forward to see more in Venice or here in the conference where your experiment is shown, one of the feasibility studies of the Lithuanian Space Agency on gravity. Thank you very much.
I'm Julijonas Urbonas, the founder of Lithuanian Space Agency that is currently developing a special space program that aims to make a planet made of human bodies. We are proposing to send humans, your bodies, into one specific location in outer space where there is no gravity, it's super cold, it's vacuum, the bodies would float until something very beautiful would happen. Because there is no gravity, no planetary gravity, but the gravities of the bodies. If you remember physics, any object that has a mass has a gravitational radiation or gravitational attraction. So those floating bodies, the population of bodies, would start to attract each other. And eventually they would make some kind of extraterrestrial composition. But if you have a substantial amount of biomass, that blob of human biomass would eventually round itself and would become a planet made of humans. We have an issue here. We don't have such a technology to make such a project a real one, but we have humans as a technology, and now, as Lithuanian Space Agency, we are prototyping with humans of different shapes and sizes and weight. We have big and small humans, and we are working on a human-based simulator of a planet of humans. Those big bodies we have are used as make-believe cosmic circumstances, whereas smaller bodies are used as human bricks that would be used for extraterrestrial architectural composition. So our prototyping works in the way as a kind of human terraforming sketchpad. Little bodies, they have to choose a poster they would like to be monumentalized for eternity, and they float according to the big humans who have to imagine what it would be like to be cosmic circumstances. And depending on a poster, different kind of compositions, extraterrestrial compositions form. And this particular prototyping and the project itself could be considered as a cosmic fossil for humans or of humans. That would actually work or would be archived for eternity. But also it could be considered as a monument for humans of humans.
A warmly welcome to the online festival Driving the Human. My name is Sabine Faller, and I am an artist and media educator at ZKM, and I will accompany you today through the section Habitat. To get closer to the concept of habitat, I give you a little insight into the idea of the political climate exhibition Critical Zones, a thought experiment, which is currently shown analog and virtual at the ZKM, and which is co-curated by the French philosopher Bruno Latour and his team. Through the exhibition, we try to raise awareness that we are living on a thin, fragile, and highly complex layer. Latour describes this as a critical zone. It is the habitat upon which all life on Earth depends. In the eyes of Latour, humanity should reconsider its previous and common images of the Earth and better rethink and look for a place to land down on Earth. In this talk, we will discuss this idea of landing, but also deal more deeply with the circumstances and conditions that are making our world to a territory we'd rather like to escape, or how we and our children can inhabit. The last version I personally prefer. So in this panel, on my side, 3 exciting guests who I would like to introduce to you in a moment, and with whom we will discuss in the upcoming hour about their different perspectives, positions, and ideas. Of course, we also want to get into touch with you. Ask your questions in the Telegram chat, and in between the last, let's say, 10 minutes of this talk, around 6:15, the discussion will be open for your questions and co-moderated by my colleague, Barbara Kielbasa. And now I will introduce our guest shortly. Bonjour, ça va? I will start with you, Alexandre Monin. You are a scientific director, a professor in the media field, and have worked intensively on strategies and designs for the Anthropocene. For the think tank of the SHIFT project, you co-wrote the report Towards Digital Sobriety about energy transition. What are, in your eyes, the urgencies of our time, and how should we react?
Well, thank you very much. Thank you very much for the invitation. Yes, I think with the advent of the Industrial Revolution, England first, then Europe quickly shifted from what French author Benoît d'Aviron calls a solar metabolic regime, where we're receiving energy from the sun, to a mining metabolic regime, extracting energy from underneath the critical zones, from places we do not inhabit. It's a reversal of the Copernican revolution. Instead of shifting from geocentrism to heliocentrism in terms of representation, Europeans did just the opposite as regards their modes of living. This is how we made the globe of globalization that Latour speaks of, tangible, a second nature that is also a ruin future-wise. And now we need proper knowledge, both practical and theoretical, to dismantle it, because we depend in the short run on what is threatening us in the longer run.
Okay, thank you, Alexandre. Frederic, we go on with you. Frederic et Toiti, because your world is the theater. You're a theater director and a historian of literature and modern science. Your latest book, Terra Forma, describes the mapping of modern science and the world through science, and at the same time invites us to look at the world from different perspectives by making the undergrounds visible. What do you think prevents us in our time to follow this invitation that you have described in your book?
Well, first of all, Sabina, thanks a lot for your invitation. And what prevents us, I guess it's a question of gaze, as Alexandre was saying. We are very much used to look at the world from above, from what I could call a fictional or a technical point of view, which is far away in the cosmos. And in fact, I have spent some years studying this historical making of the point of view of this gaze, which has created beautiful images that we all cherish, that we love, you know, the blue marble and this kind of images. But the problem is that this gaze, as Bruno Latour has mentioned many times, this gaze doesn't allow us to grasp the complexity or the urgency of our time, especially the intricate relationship between human, non-human, and technical artifacts. So if we indeed would like to try to lend without crushing, as Latour says, and as he invites us to do in the beautiful exhibition I was lucky enough to see, actually, we need to renew our gaze. We need to change our point of view. We need to find new ways of representing the earth we live on, not from above, as in ancient geography, but from inside the critical zone. And this is such renewal of our images that I have tried to imagine with my colleagues, Alexandra and Axel, in the book you mentioned, Terra Forma. And maybe I'd like to share with you some of those images today. Thank you.
Welcome. Thank you, Frederic. And we go on with Guillaume Pitron. You are a journalist, author, and documentary filmmaker, and you deal with the dark sides of globalization, as in your book, The Rare Metal Wars. How do you assess the current situation? Is it a crash or a landing approach? Guillaume.
Thanks, Sabine. Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to speak. I think to answer your question, I'd like to pursue what has been said by Alexandre and Frédéric. We all share this common belief that the more we are going into a technological world, which sometimes actually brings us the approach or the understanding that we are able to live more dematerialized, to separate us from what makes the materiality of the world. In fact, the more we go into that technological direction, the more actually we have to dig into the ground for actually making this dematerialized digital world possible. We speak about the cloud all the time, the cloud in which you put your videos and pictures, and this looks like a place which doesn't exist, as if you were out of this world. But actually, to build the cloud, you have to dig even more deeply to make this cloud possible, because our world really much depends upon resources. And that's my area of study, to actually link our connected lives and to connect them for real to actually what's under the ground. And the critical zone is obviously this thin layer that is 100 meters under our feet, in which we have for the last thousands of years and in the last centuries and more in the last decades. And this zone that we will even more exploit and more look into for extracting these resources that we are very much hugely depending on. And the more we look into the solar world as solar energy, as Alexandre said, actually, the more we'll have to dig into the ground to catch the power of the sun and to turn it into electricity. So this kind of paradox that I try to address, and I'm sure we are going to have further exchange on that. Thank you.
Perfect. Thanks for your short introduction and your statements. And now we will open up the round of questions. But before that, Bruno Latour has stated that at the time of globalization, we need a kind of complete restart of our thinking and acting to make the world habitable again. And therefore, all these contemporary metaphors have become important: sustainable, durable, breathable, and livable. And with this thought in my mind, I'd like to start with you, Frédéric. As a historian, you look, and let me be a little bit dramatic, at the ruins of our former civilizations. And yeah, actually now we are in the middle of a new crisis. Lockdown has shown us how vulnerable humanity is. Frédéric, with your knowledge of the past, what is our story so far, and where are we going to land if we are going on like this?
Well, historians can't say much about the future, I'm afraid, but it's true that we can try to find patterns or things to help us. And actually, as I said, I've been very interested in a major cosmological shift in history, the one that has been named the scientific revolution. And in many ways, it reminds us, it can help us maybe to understand what's going on to us, especially on this question of ruins. I just want to quote the great astronomer Kepler, whom I like a lot, and he was using, like us, the metaphor of ruins, which is, first of all, an architectural metaphor. And he described at the beginning of his great book, Astronomia Nova, a cosmos in ruins. And he sets himself and the people of his time the great and exciting task of rebuilding an entirely new cosmos from these ruins. And interestingly for us, I think, this task of rebuilding from the ruins was partly made through fiction, through narrative. And those narratives, I try to study them in my book, Fiction of the Cosmos. This is a completely new vision of the cosmos. And what is interesting, I think, for us is that it was not enough to use scientific and technical tools to rebuild the cosmos. It was necessary, but not enough, not sufficient. They also needed new stories. The kind of stories they were telling were stories of a break. And what I find interesting in the people I read, like Bruno Latour, but also Anna Tsing, but also Baptiste Morisot, or Descola, all those people, the kind of stories they use today, the kind of stories we need, are stories about, trying to be careful. That stories about precaution, about attention. There are stories about, okay, what to do with the ruins precisely. Can we make them into habitable spaces, which is what Anat Singh is doing, for instance. So I just want to share with you, and that will be the last 2 minutes of this little answer. I just want to share with you a few images from that book, Terra Forma, that basically, can you see it? So, which really tries to show how to represent this critical zone. So for instance, this first image is exactly what Guillaume was saying about how did we dig into the critical zone little by little. Mm-hmm. And what we discover then is a very, very strange thing. How can we change our gaze so that this critical zone is visible? So of course, it's not only about new stories, it's also about new images. And there's another little map I would like to share with you. It's about ruins. Now that we have ruins, how can we make them habitable again? And this is what this last map of the book called Memories tries to do, is to transfer a negative sign, which is a ruin, like, a nuclear plant, or kind of waste. How do you transfer waste into something habitable? So it's this kind of strange compass that we build together. So just to share with you a few glimpses at Terra Forma, but to me, it's an interesting fact that we should mix new narratives and new images in order to try to land, so to speak. We need maps to try to land. Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for this insight in Terra Forma. Maybe we stay talking about imagination of the future. Guillaume, you as an author, is it easier to imagine the end of the world than to create new narratives and positive stories for a living? What do you think?
I think it's somehow easier for many people to imagine the end of the world. I think so. We have in France a very strong movement. I mean, I don't know if it's a strong movement, but it's a kind of an important movement, which we call collapsologists. Those researchers, whom I know actually, who tend to see also in the past good arguments for saying that we are going nowhere and that our civilization as it is and the globalization as it goes actually will end up in breaking up our civilization. And these collapsologist people somehow become eschatologist people. It's not only that they say that this is going to be the end of a system which is be replaced by another one, but there is somehow a religious thinking in this way of speaking about the end of our system. It goes until the point where some might believe that actually we're going to disappear and 7 billion people will die in a couple of decades. And we have a former minister in France who is very much into this and very much part of this collapsologist movement. I don't believe in that. And I speak under the control of Frédéric, who is the historian, but I remember reading a book by a French historian whose name is Luc Marie. And Luc Marie wrote a book and he said, how many times did we announce the end of the world in the history since the end of Rome, since the end of antiquity? And the end of history, he recounted, was announced 182 times. And we're still here. So I believe we are somehow in the announcement of the 183rd end of history. Whether it is the end of a system or the end of humans on the planet, I don't know. Once again, it depends on people, on how they understand that. But I believe there's kind of a lack of imagination to say, well, it can't go further than that. That being said, this is also how can I say, announcing that is also a reason of the resilience that we have shown for the last decades and last centuries and last thousands of years. The more we tend to understand the risks that surround us, that actually may impact our civilization, the more we tend to react to that. And we tend to take good decisions in order to avoid such scenarios. And I'm very much into optimist. I very much believe in resilience. And in this context, I believe in technologies for actually finding the solutions to the huge challenges that we are facing. We're facing huge challenges, and technologies will be part of this. In the digital sector, in the energy sector, we speak about electricity storage as a future coming soon, probably, innovation that will change our approach to our energy challenges. We cannot store this electricity very well today, but we're making so many progresses that maybe tomorrow we'll be able to have electricity storage technologies which will allow us to store for years, the electricity brought by sun rays in one solar farm in the Sahara Desert for only 1 or 2 days. And that might change completely, our challenges we are facing in terms of how do we address our electricity and energy needs without impacting too much environment. And I want to believe in this. On the other hand, having imagination means thinking that these kind of technologies will not save us and will not make everything easy in the future. And maybe there is a bit of I try to find the word in English, paresse in French, but maybe there is a bit of easy way of thinking to believe that, we just got to wait for the next technologies to solve all the issues that we are facing, which actually will be saved and will be, fixed by addressing political challenges, social challenges, ethical challenges, philosophical challenges. And I just want to finish with that one example. I love to work on circular economy for our future in order to, use less resources in the future. That's one of the big challenges we face. And circular economy is about recycling techniques. It's about eco-conception, eco-design techniques. It's about technologies for actually, reusing, the materials as many times as we can. And when we start to go into that direction, we realize that it's about bringing companies together, people to speak to each other together, to find supply versus demand, to make them coincide each other. And at some point, it's nothing about technology. It's all about reorganizing a new way of living together. And that's a real proof that the future cannot only be relying on technologies and that it's all about humans.
Mm-hmm. Guillaume, at this moment, I'd like to ask Alexandre, because you are our technology expert in this panel. Do we really need a life-saving utopia in technology or not? And how would it be designed in your eyes?
Well, thank you very much for this question. It's really good because I think we will have lots of disagreements, which is always good in a panel when not everyone is okay, to share the same opinion. So I'm really happy about that. If I may answer your question by following up on what has been said earlier, I think that will be a nice way of doing it. Regarding ruins, I think it's interesting to have maybe another understanding of ruins that the one we generally have, which is very picturesque or picturesque, romantic ruins, even Nazi ruins. The Nazi has a theory of ruins, which was very well known. They want to leave ruins after them. That was kind of their project. It was a really crazy project. But anyway, it was very central. But there's another understanding of ruins. It's the understanding of Walter Benjamin, who said that the real ruin is the bourgeois city. And the bourgeois city was actually up and running, it was developing and all that. And I think we have to understand that the real ruin is not the decaying ruin. Of course, there are ruins and those we identify, but the real ruin is what in our current system is currently working, but really soon will no longer work that well and is not adapted for the conditions of the Anthropocene. So things we take for granted, supply chain, where we get our food from, where we get our energy from, all those systems. We take them for granted, but actually they're ruins. And this is the threatening aspect of things. The very foundations of this second nature we do inhabit are really frail. This is something that a crisis like the coronavirus crisis is showing as well. If we stop everything, how do people survive? Where do we get our food from? And questions like that, and problems of energy that we are going to have in France during the winter, especially this year. So it's a taste of what is coming. So I think it's interesting to understand the ruin behind what a colleague of mine calls the cliche, the ruin in what seems to be functioning, what seems to be, an example of modernity, an example of well-functioning technology. Thereupon lies the true ruin, which is, of course, even more difficult to understand and to decipher. And regarding religion and the role of technology, it's interesting. I have been studying myself the collapsologist movement in France. I was actually one of the publishers with Cyprien Tasset and Laurent Salat of a special issue of Multitude, the journal, precisely on the collapse movement. It was said by Guillaume that it's some sort of religious movement. Of course, you can ascribe to people who believe that this might be the end of the world, a kind of eschatological belief. But what I found out was that rather these were people who were dealing with these topics without any religious anchoring, which might be a problem as well. Without the means to understand, deconstruct those religious concepts, myths, and because they were cut from this tradition, that created more problems than it solved. But I do believe that the idea that technology will save us is as religious as this idea of the end of the world. It's the belief in progress. It's the belief that technology has all the answers. And for reasons I will probably describe later, I believe that is not the case, which is also something very difficult to understand, because we have been projecting this future full of technologies, and now maybe we have to renounce it. Now maybe this future is asynchronous with regards to our current situation. That is very difficult, because we have trained people to understand that they had been entering a digital revolution or something like that. And you say this is going to be an aborted revolution. Well, it's kind of a betrayal. Everything had to change according to this revolution. And now it's not the case, because the Anthropocene is more encompassing as a change than the digital revolution. That's difficult and unacceptable somehow. So we have to deal with this situation. And last point, maybe just, and I will be able to say a few words about that later, about narratives. It's true that narratives are very strong in lots of thinking. Frédéric have been mentioning, and that's seeing Baptiste Morisot and others. It's also very strong in the collapsology movement. A lot of people are talking about narratives, are trying to build new narratives and things like that. But we have to be wary that the one strong narrative today, and this is something we see in the collapse movement, which is kind of sundering the collapse movement to halves, is the QAnon narratives. That's a very strong narrative nowadays, which is pure conspiracy theory and things like that. But there is a dark aspect of narratives and narrations, and I think right now we're dealing with these aspects. So we should be much more wary, I think, of narratives, because those people that will impose their narratives are not the researchers we like, but rather crazy conspiracy theorists.
So we were talking a lot about ruins, Alexandre. So what do you all think is the learning out of this? How can we create, or what is necessary for making a new modern world to be possible? To concentrate not on these dark sides you have said.
You want me to?
It's Who wants to jump in? Alexander, if you like, go on.
Yeah, I think one of the problems we have is directly related to the issue at stake of habitability. We are wondering whether we should, I think you said something like that, Sabine, design habitability, or that there are reflections about that. But I think precisely the problem is that we have been designing habitability, and then we inherit the situation we're in because of that. We have, and that was somehow part of the progress, of the real progress we made in terms of our conditions on Earth, which was really harsh before. We have been designing, and as a French theoretician of design has been saying, improving the habitability of Earth. That's Alain Finelli. And actually he defines design as being an effort to improve the habitability on Earth. But this is precisely what we have been doing through our technology, our economic growth, our sustained but not sustainable economic growth, this shift from a heliocentric regime to a geocentric extractivist regime. And that is, of course, part of the problem. So how can we decenter from this perspective of designing habitability to understand how we may find a place on Earth with other beings that also design, actually are the true designers of the habitability of Earth. I mean, plants are doing much more than humans with this regards, and other beings in the sea and elsewhere. So how can we find a place and leave a place for other people? So also going again for a very long time.
Frederick, maybe you want to jump in. We were talking about reconnection with all kinds of livings, and I think you have a good insight what this could mean, especially maybe for a new concept for the future.
Yeah, well, I could answer and prolong what Alexandre was saying with yet another little picture of Terraforma, just as a way to I don't know if you see that, it's and it's also a way to give the floor to Guillaume, who has worked much more than me on this question of resources. But just to try to answer the question of habitability, I mean, I was very struck by what Alexandre just said, this strange double inheritance that we need to do from the past and from the future that will not happen. I really like the way you phrased that. The way we tried to represent that in Terraforma was in this strange little 4 little bubbles that you see, we try to represent the way in which we inherit precisely the idea of resources. How do we inhabit? How do we find resources? How have we found resources up to now? Well, we did that by making some kind of biome, ventouses, kind of bubbles in which you just take everything from a place. So what you see on this strange little map is a forest, a mine, a chemical valley near Lyon, and the fourth one is it's a plant. So basically you have 4 typical ways of extracting resources, which mean that you just take everything to the ground and completely until it's basically a dead land, which can't be inhabited anymore. And the reason why we have worked a lot on that is that because Alexandra and Axel, my 2 colleagues on Terraformai, they are young architects, and most of the projects they have been asked to work on in the last 10 years are projects to re-inhabit industrial, technological, ruined territories, basically. So they have been very much obsessed by that, and they wanted to represent this typical process of extractivism. So of course, I'm not an economist, and I have no idea of how to get rid of that. But it was important for us to represent in a certain way this crazy way of using land until it's dead, basically. And I pass you the floor, Guillaume, because that's your topic.
Talking about resources now, Guillaume.
Sure, I'm very impressed by what Frédéric has shown us. I had never seen this representation of what we extract from the ground and what we do to the earth. Usually is we're not used to see that, because in our countries, maybe Germany can be an exception because it's still a very much industrialized country. As a part of the industry in your growth, in your economy is twice as big as it is in our country in France. I think in Germany it's 25% of the GDP of Germany, but it's like 12% in France. So, our industries are away from cities, and we have no mines anymore. We used to, but we just closed them because we just don't want to have the dirt, out of these mines. And usually we send these extraction activities thousands of kilometers from where we are, from where the consumer is, that actually we just don't even know what's going on. We have made these impacts invisible. We don't see them anymore. And that's why these pictures are impressive, because it brings us back to the very consequence of our ways of living or of our choices as consumers. But the more we create a distance between what we do as consumers and how it impacts the technosphere, as Alexandre was mentioning this word when we prepared this panel, the less it will be easy to get a sense of that. I just want to finish with just one calculation that has been made by a French researcher, Olivier Vidal, a couple of years ago. His conclusions were published in Nature, in the review Nature. I think it was back in 2016 or 17. And he tried to figure out how much minerals we would need for the 30 next years, for all the needs we are having right now for digital technologies, green technologies. I'm not talking even about this, primary commodities such as oil or even food commodities. I'm just talking about metals and minerals, and we are growing at such a rate that actually we're going to have to extract from the ground in the next 30 years as many minerals than all the minerals we have extracted for the last 60,000 years. So since human is human, since sapiens is sapiens, and we're going to use and extract more for the next 30 years, as much at least, than for the last 60,000 years. So that gives you an idea of the kind of impact it can have just to have this figure. We still feel today in some part of the world the impacts of Roman times extraction activities. We can still see the pollution of some mines back to the Roman Empire. So guess what we're leaving to the next generations in a couple of hundreds of years or thousands of years. Sorry. So that's just a way to go in Frédéric's direction. At some point, we've got to turn all these words into pictures. Pictures is what makes people, change their mind. And we need this picture that you've been showing even more, actually, to actually get a sense of what we're really doing and the real impact of our lives.
Okay, thank you, Guillaume. Maybe a question for you three, because we're talking about resources and the impact of resources, and our ideology of the capitalism is a strong ideology and we are living in it. And so what do you think? Can we bring together ecology with the idea of infinite growth? What do you think?
That's impossible. Okay. That's a nonsense.
I fully agree with that. There's a distinction that I like by a French physicist called José Alloy, and he speaks of living technologies against zombie technologies, and he explains that living technologies were basically built on renewables, but not with the problems we have right now, because of course, as Guillaume has showed us in his books, renewables right now need some ore to be built, and of course resources that are not renewables. But in the past, at least, living technologies used renewables mainly, and they were parts of geochemical cycles, and so they did not exist for too long as waste, for example. And the technologies we're using right now, including digital technologies, but not just digital technologies, are technologies that are built on stocks, on resources that are not renewable, that actually do not function for a very long time due to planned obsolescence or plain obsolescence, and at the same time that live in the form of waste for a very, very long time. Whence the name zombie technologies. They cannot die, they just stay in the ground, they just build up as a geological strata. And whether we find them useful, whether we can diminish their carbon footprints, whether we can make them more efficient, whatever, they will remain zombie technologies because it's an essential part of what they are. We cannot make them something else. So we are producing these zombie technologies, and we cannot expect to have some sort of way out of that that will be good, that will solve all our problems.
Frédéric, you are still there, and when we were preparing this panel, you talk about that we are at the moment in the middle of a rock concert. I really like that metaphor. Do you think I try to be optimistic all the time. So what is your idea about how can we go back to the rock concert before the crisis to make it a real rock concert as a metaphor for our future and our planet?
Yes, I remember my metaphor. I think I was saying that because of the lockdown at the moment, there is this strange energy that we can't actually, use. We want to change things, and we are all completely alone in our in our flats and trying to discuss and exchange ideas beautifully, like today. But this really feels like being in a rock concert and just sitting with masks. So I think that was the metaphor. But I mean, trying to be optimistic, I'm afraid it will be a very banal answer linked to the fact that when you have big turmoil and big crisis, there is always a chance that things will change for good. And I quite like the way, I mean, I very much like the way in which actually Bruno Latour has turned this whole pandemic situation, which is a where to land after where to land. The fact that actually the idea that this pandemic situation, and many people say that, is just intensifies the everything. It intensifies our problems, but it also intensifies our feeling that we absolutely need to change. And exactly what Alexandre was saying as well. It also intensifies the way in which we can experiment, like slowing down, looking around us, making new alliances. I'm afraid this is still very abstract, but at the moment I'm preparing a new play with Bruno, and it's all about experimenting, experimenting in this strange confinement, which is actually our world. You know, we are confined in the critical zone, and we need to learn to move and to inhabit that. And in a way, we need to rediscover this strange space that we have forgotten a little by being in this fiction of the globe. So yes, trying to be optimistic in such a dark time is difficult, but it's, of course, believing in the power of our imagination, obviously, but it's also the idea that, as Guillaume was saying, the apocalypse is not completely here. It's very close, but it's not completely here. So that's just a very little bit of time to go. That's what I could try to say.
And it's, in a way, it's paradox. Like, we have to hurry, but we have to be slow to rethink and do the good steps, and not just running.
But the interesting thing, Frédéric, with what you said, jumping on this coronavirus thing, is that what was unthinkable is happening. And before that, some things happened on the US politics, on the European agenda for the last 3-4 years, which were unthinkable. Brexit, Trump, and it's happening. And I think if someone who has been, very ill for the last 3 years, almost, how do you call that in French, in English, dans le coma, how do you say dans le coma? In a dark, deep sleep out of the hospital, and would suddenly wake up and say, what happened for the last 3 years? And we would have to explain this person what happened for the last 3 years. He would say, that's not possible. And it's happening. And a coma, okay, thank you. And I think it's interesting because it brings us a flexibility of thinking that maybe we didn't have before. We are more resilient. We in Paris, I believe, are very much resilient today, much more than we were 5 or 10 years ago, because we've been having for the last 5-10 years terrorist attacks, fires on Notre Dame, and all these kind of things. And I think that makes us more resilient. And I think that's interesting with this crisis, that what was unthinkable is happening, and we are ready for, going through. Hope not, but we are psychologically more strong for actually experiencing and going through other challenges that will come ahead, because we are more prepared for that than we have ever been in our generation, I guess. And I think that's a good thing with this crisis, I guess. It makes us stronger and even more able to make our imagination work, because if we don't, the world will imagine something for us at our place.
Thank you, Guillaume. Now I like to ask my co-moderator, Barbara Kielbasa. It's 6:15, we are perfectly in time. Can we open up the roundtable for the Q&A from public?
With pleasure. Hello. And well, first of all, merci Frédéric, Guillaume, Alexandre, and Sabine for this lovely discussion. That was really inspiring. And merci also to the Telegrammers for the ongoing discussion that was that was happening next to this discussion on Telegram. There was one question that I thought was kind of provocative. It was, do you think that predicting the end of the world creates the kind of media spectacle that actually prevents and distracts us from any real change? So maybe that goes back to the rock concert metaphor, which actually, now that I think of it, reminds me of Plato's Höhlengleichnis. I don't know what it's called in English, but anyway, the question was about distraction. Sorry.
But, you know, expect the worst and hope for the best. That's exactly what is being said. And yes, you have to expect the worst, and that's because you expect the worst scenarios that actually you can get over them. That's called resilience. But you need to have people to think about this. Cassandra was right. The Greek mythology lady was right.
I agree with that, but I think it's interesting because you can see the question in two ways. Predicting the worst is absolutely necessary, as Clive Hamilton said 5 years ago, or 10 years ago already, in his amazing book Requiem for a Species, Requiem pour une espèce. You have to lose all hope. So in a way, it's absolutely necessary in order to act. But there's another way to answer the question, and it's about entertainment and Plato's cave, which is that there is a taste for the apocalypse. There is a taste, a strange one, a dark one, for catastrophe. And of course, we should be careful, because there is this fascination for destruction, which is almost ecological pornography, I could say. And this is indeed very dangerous in itself, because it can indeed stop us from making the right steps.
Sorry, Alexandre, because I wanted to point this out into your direction, because there was another question on the Telegram chat. They were very concerned with conspiracy theories. And I think that links very well to what you just said, Frédéric. So the question, there was a whole discussion on Telegram about conspiracy theories. How to deal with them? And I wanted to point that into your direction, Alexandre. Sorry.
No problem. I can answer with a follow-up of what have been just said, because it's intimately linked. I think the question of the spectacle, the Borgian spectacle, and about the end of the world is a legitimate question. But at the same time, we should understand that, going back to the collapsologist movements in France, which I will not defend on all accounts. That's not my issue. That's not my problem. But what was notable, what was interesting, is that actually it brought a lot of people who were not accustomed to these questions, not from the ecological movements or eco-socialist movements or whatever. People we generally like in those settings that we are right now. It brought people who were separated from those arenas, people who were engineers, people who were CEOs, and other kind of people who, because it was a very technical discourse, you can say it's religious, but at the same time it was very, very technical, pushing forwards discourses, scientific discourses, scientific state of the art. It brought audiences which were not, as I said, again, accustomed to dealing with those issues. They became concerned by these issues. And of course, they don't share the same reactions we would expect from people who have another political background. But at the same time, I think that's part of staying with the trouble. These people who are concerned by this problem are not like we would like them to be, nice eco-socialist people, but we have to deal with that. And I guess that's the same with the, how would I say, with the conspiracy theory. Those discourses happen, and I see researchers
that I would not have expected to fall for these discourses, completely falling for these discourses. I see people in the collapse movement falling for these discourses. So it fractures society along lines we were not accustomed to, which is of course very interesting, and also requires that we understand why we were weakened enough to fall for these conspiracy theories. This is where I will maybe take a different stance from Guillaume, meaning that we can say that what happens to us makes us stronger in a kind of Nietzschean sense, you know, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. I think it's not always the case. What doesn't kill you often makes you weaker. And currently the crisis, there are a lot of people who are weakened from a mental health perspective, social perspective, with regards to the living conditions. And so we have to deal with that. Of course, resilience is a concept that is trying to, you know, have us benefit from the issues that we are facing, encountering. But I think it's a very contested notion, this notion of resilience. Don't want to discuss it right now, but I think we could have an entire discussion on that topic.
I like the idea of ecological photography. That's a very interesting one, because the end of the world could be a beautiful end of the world. The atomic bomb is kind of striking and somehow beautiful. And seeing these huge fires, mega fires in Australia or Brazil or California is somehow beautiful. And as journalists, I do video, I do documentaries, and you want to show what is tracking for the people's interests, and what is tracking is impressive images. And that is a really big question. I just finished a documentary which is being aired on Arte, even in Germany, and we filmed with a drone places completely destroyed by rare metals exploitation. And that was freaking beautiful. And that was a question with my co-documentary maker to say, how can we show something which is obviously horrible, but at the same time beautiful, which is very aesthetic? Isn't there a moral issue here, an ethical issue to be questioned? What do I do as a journalist, you know, showing something that shouldn't happen, but which actually could even be painted or photographed and somehow aesthetically beautiful? How do you convince the people that it should not happen if at the same time they want to see more of that?
Yeah, thank you. Alexandre, you want to
the picturesque ruins that we were talking about previously. I think there is a whole danger of having too picturesque, aestheticized ruins. But there can be another understanding of ruins as well.
All right. I mean, there were some more questions on Telegram, and also a comment that I think is very important to voice out is that obviously here in our panel, we are a very one-sided part of the world, trying to talk about the entire world. So that's something that, of course, has to be voiced in this space. And I would like to invite you to afterwards go into the Telegram talk and try to find the other questions that unfortunately we couldn't bring up right now, because yeah, we are at the end of the panel. And Sabine, I would like to give the word to you to wrap it up.
Thank you, Barbara. So yeah, not only time is running, time is running, yes, but for our planet too. And so I think my personal key take today, after this exciting insight into your thoughts, experiences, and wishes for our living space, is that changes of perspectives are necessary to design new imaginations. And with Alexandre's word, we have to deal with all kind of species. I was doing that note as well. Yeah, I'm sure festivals like this give us the power to go on with our mission, to stay connected and act together. And yeah, maybe it's in our hands to land in a good future, I hope so. And not only for our grandchildren, we have to act for the many more life forms in this planet and on this planet. So now I wish you an exciting evening with a lot of more great discussion and artistic performances to come. I know it was a quick start into the topic, and feel free, Barbara was telling you to go on with your questions in the Telegram chat. The discussion will go on there. We will be there as well. And now goodbye from the panel Habitat.
Yes, and goodbye also from me. We are now going to go on into a wonderful venture, with a field trip to the swamps, actually, meeting Gediminas and Nomeda Urbonas for a lecture on their swamp observatory, and I really love their work. So Peter, you can take us to them now. Thank you very much, and goodbye from this panel.
Thank you.
Hello, we now have the self-declared swampists Gediminas and Nomeda Urbonas with us for a live lecture. Welcome, it's really great we had a couple of minutes together before. It's really great to meet you, and thanks for joining us for this session, because much of your recent work is indeed about habitat, and not just about any habitat, but about wetlands and bogs. As artists and educators, you have set up the ongoing School of Swamps, and this year, your book Swamps in the New Imagination is coming out. Is it actually already out?
No, not yet.
Not yet.
It's very slow, like a swamp.
Nice one. Well, I certainly will buy it because, I'm really intrigued by your work, even more after our chat. And as a half Scot, I actually really feel at home in bogs and moors. So just before we start, I have two small announcements. First, if you have questions for them, please share them on Telegram, and we'll try to hear one or two in the end of the session. And secondly, Nomeda, you said it's impossible to contain a swamp in 15 minutes. So I already informed the team that we will be a little bit over time, because I think we should hear what you have to share. And with that, I would like to hand over to you and the Swamp Observatory.
Thank you.
Yes, Moritz, please.
It's a great pleasure for us to be part of this slow multi-annual project, Driving the Human. As it was a huge pleasure as well to finally install Swamp Observatory exhibition or installation at the critical zones at ZKM. So on behalf of our team, a big team, not only two of us, but the big team, we would like to thank you for invitation and these amazing opportunities to share our practice and project. Gediminas, what is driving the human?
I don't know. I mean, I can only speak for myself. What drives me, I can speak also for maybe our practice. And the answer is very blunt, swamp. Swamp is what drives human. Why? I think through the history of the humanity, we have a very troublesome, very complex relationship with our environment. And I think swamp is the essence of it. Human settlements were expanding on the coast of the territories of the swamp. We violated all the boundaries with animals, with water, with the ecotones. Swamps are the ecotones, the transitory ecosystem. And what is happening that swamps coming back. They're coming back in the form of the repressed, and we yet don't know how to deal with that. So, of course, through the history, we've been extracting, humans, moderns, extracting the peat moss that is absolutely fantastic material, and as it is a result of the 1,000 years of the compression of the plants, the spores, it registers all the climatic conditions and all the exchanges. Basically, we could say that it is a frozen coral reef, frozen, kind of like marmalade. It is registers all the exchanges, holobiontic exchanges, but also it compresses the memories of exploitation, of resilience, of disobedience. As we know from the histories of the Maroons who found their escape in the swamps. Swamps were not only the malign places as the Great Dismal Swamp, but also they were places for the escape, for hope, for human imagination. It was also inspiration for many artists like William Blake or Gustavo Doré or many other artists who, and also cinematographers who try to negotiate this uncanny relationship with the swamp as the place of escape, place where something that is not allowed can happen, the riparian place, place that cannot be submitted to regulation, to the regimes of governmentality. You know, swamps are always escaping from those regimes. They cannot be contained by the national territories. They're always also places for the fairy tales, for prejudice, also places where we can find eco-fiction, as in Ursula Le Guin's writing, or also like in Swamp Thing, you know, that is also looking for some feminine, some powers, almost like, you know, we could say like a earth womb, as well for. And again, sorry for this anthropomization of the natural environment. For us, it is also swamp is interesting as the metonym, as under the swamp we find fens, bogs, and many other natural environments that otherwise can be called wetlands. But we specifically interested in the swamp because of political rhetoric, you know, that has the origins in the 19th century, the draining of the swamps, or Drenare de Palude. But as well, it is also inspiration for many artists like Robert Smithson or Juan Downey, who are trying to look also at indigenous epistemologies, at something that can be called also invisible architecture, that is produced by these relations between human and non-human or modern human entities through the daily rituals, language, and so on. But what is being done by science about the swamps? As we know, it took hundreds and hundreds for the swamps to be subscribed in the biosphere registry by the United Nations. And we got inspiration from Karl Albert Weber, a German botanist who spent several years in Memel Delta. That was a former territory of the Prussia, nowadays is part of Lithuania. But as we know, the swamps are leaking, they're disobeying the boundaries. And Karl Albert Weber was studying again, inspired by Humboldt, Humboldtian idea that is looking into relationships and interdependencies between the air and the soil and the plants, who register those interdependencies through their intricate shapes. As a botanist, he was trying to sort of like build the scholarship of the swamp. And in his beautiful writing, he was also observing the different optical perspectives that are happening because of accumulation of the methionine and the gases. As we know, the air in the swamp is a bit different. And also because of the high acidity of the soil and the peat, it informs also the patterns of the plants. But these interdependencies are not only between the soil, air, and water, and the plants, but also humans are part of that milieu. So the starting point in the swamp school was to enter that milieu, to enter that first scientifically researched swamp, where Karl Albert Weber spent 3 years and published the so-called Swamp Bible, the first study on the raised bogs, and to understand how this spongy entity, how this milieu, how this being that has this enormous capacity to function as a machine can also become our learning environment. Learning environment for the unpredictability, uncertainty, also instability. as we are living in the times where the cities are getting submerged in the water, and Venice has registered through its history hundreds of years of that experience. It is also important for us to think how can we learn from the swamp in order to adapt not only ourselves, but also adapt our education and our relationship with the surrounding environment. So swamp becomes the perfect place for the engagement and for the study. And where these complicated relations happen in the Venice, and specifically if we speak about Venice Biennale, for which we were commissioned to conceive the curatorial proposition for the National Pavilion, our starting point was precisely looking into the swamp that can help us to change habits of thought. Why should we think of the national in the times of the total war, of the total crisis? It is irrelevant. So we started to articulate a swamp pavilion that leaks through the national boundaries, that acquires the clandestine character, that acquires also the idea of the embodiments, where the pavilion can itself can be dispersed, can be spread, can also use the whole Venice as a classroom, the whole lagoon as a classroom. The inspiration for this comes from the swamp, but also comes from the cybernetics. Stafford Beer, who was designing the CyberScene, this supercomputer for the Chilean government, he was studying the pond. Okay, it's not precisely the swamp, but as we're using the swamp as a metonymy for many of these ecosystems. So we can also say that Stafford Beer was inspired by the swamp as a brain. You know, he suggested to plug the homeostatic system, the system that can offer the human organizational systems the balance, plug into the human organizations and think how it could help us to cope with something that is beyond our capacity to cope. So inspired by Stafford Beer and also Gordon Pask, we try to organize the curatorial, but also artistic and pedagogical program and events and the spatial organization of the Swamp School. Organizing in the 3 chapters, Swamp Radio, that is dealing with transmission and listening, Futurity Islands, that is focusing on sympoetics, on symbiotic relations, and the communism, that is looking into the cohabitation. To support that work, we edited 3 manuals, each for each chapter, and each manual has 3 propositions. One that is dealing with the question of swamp and modernity, another that is looking into pedagogy of the amphibian, and that is our rereading of the transdisciplinarity, and also looking into the examples, historic examples of the hybrid practices, figures such as the Harrisons, Juan Downey, Marianne Amisher, and so on. So just looking into the Swamp Radio, where the listening to the sounds of the distorted planets is impossible without specific technology. We're bringing the artist to record voices of the environment in Venice, to intervene and also to transmit within the radius of the lagoon. So this becomes the radio for the lagoon. And it has, as you can see, 2-way transmission, listening and transmitting on the spot, but also looking into the specific gear, like in Jana Binderen practice, where you need technology in order to listen to those frequencies that otherwise are not accessible to human ear, not also to eliminate techniques that suggest the indigenous techniques that suggest possibilities of listening through our bodies, listening through our bones, and connecting the human skeleton to the to the tree, to the roots of the mangrove tree, and so on. Looking also into the energy cycles, like in the project of the mud battery. Also looking into the technology that is suggested by the insect, and according to Mark Wigley, we as humans becoming insects with the help of the antennas and help of our mobile devices that help us to listen and to transmit and constantly to reconfigure our disposition in the environment, constantly produce the images and sounds that confirm that register and create yet new layers of imagination. So, of course, the infrastructure that is being deployed here are the pipes. As we know, the pipe is the major symbol of Anthropocene. So we are hacking, we are bringing this back from the swamps by saying don't drain the swamp, we're bringing it back to the cultural poetic domain. We're trying to expand the idea of the infrastructure, hacking it from the techno-administrative sector, so to speak. Not to forget also workshops with children that engage the idea that architecture can also be done not only by the human, but also by the insects, by other species, and understanding that we are always sharing the habitats. And the model itself, or what we call the PET, so this is our PET swamp that is being brought by the group of biologists, group of scientists and architects to Venice. So this is the Nordic coral that supported by the peat of 3,000 years. And we are looking at how in this new condition, the new climatic condition of Venice, which is much more warmer and also more saline, the new species can appear, the new relationships can be built. Also looking into the economic cycles of the such, for example, as a tourism and also souvenirs, and how all that is affecting the natural cycles, also affecting the surrounding, and how the swamp as a sponge can sort of like absorb and absorb and filter and decontaminate, participating in these economic exchanges. Also looking at how the Venice is also part of the archipelago, and the islands been always registering these reciprocal relationships between the human economy and economy of the others. And in this case, Campalto Island itself is being rendered from the garbage. And as we're talking about human, non-human, and modern human, I think it is also very important to bring into attention the voices of those that are being pushed at the sides of the society, as in this case, the Assemblea Sociale per la Casa, the community of people, of homeless people of Venice that are really suffering because of the Airbnb, and at the same time looking into how the local ecosystem, namely the Phragmites and other plants that can be found in the Barenas, in the lagoon of Venice, can actually be used for the restoration, for the and also bring the vernacular techniques instead of like bringing some building technologies that are produced by using chemistry. As well, looking at the foraging and also our relationship between our body and how for the fermentation and for cooking, we could also make healthy relationship.
How you feed yourself and your body, you feed your mental abilities, you feed your mood, definitely inspire you to share these nice effects or gradable effects towards the others.
Cooking and also understanding the well-being of the human body that is absolutely interwoven in the milieu. It is part of the milieu, and this interdependency can also be inspiring for the architecture. We are looking into the vernacular techniques such as Torfhaus in Iceland, which is the most windy and most humid and most cold place on the planet. The combination of the three perhaps would be very rare to find in any other place. And that is where the well-being is being also scientifically measured with the help of the French biologists who counted every bacteria and every eukaryote that are conditioning the healthy well-being of the human body in these extreme conditions. So here the argument is, of course, to look at the vernacular techniques such as Torfhaus. The swamp for us, it is a project of imagination. It is a project that can help to deschool and also decolonize minds and thinking. But this project also is impossible to manage, to imagine without technology. And when I'm saying that, of course, I have in mind Ursula Le Guin, who said that what is technology? Technology is our engagement with the material world, you know. But this material world is also AI is also part of this material world, you know. So we are also as part of the Swamp School working on the so-called Swamp Intelligent project, inspired by Stafford Beer and Gordon Pask, trying to create a swamp brain, right, Nameda?
Right. So here the Swamp Intelligence module or a Swamp AI module is taught during this period of the Swamp School to discriminate between architecture and nature. And his task or her task in this case is to imagine and to produce the hybrid, something between the architecture and nature. So it picks up different categories just by itself, whatever it wants or she wants from the categories of architecture and categories of nature, and produces this like very weird hybrids, which are quite uncanny for the human, I think, gaze of you. Okay.
So this swamp intelligence, also part of the three figures, or the four figures.
Exactly.
Of the four figures. So swamp has so many facets, so I'm forgetting how many facets swamp has. So it is part of the four figures that construct Swamp Observatory that is recently been installed in this COVID window. Was installed at the mezzanine space at ZKM. And here you can see the projection on the ox bladder, this water ox that you can find in the swamps in Italy, but also in the swamps in Lithuania. Perhaps also Carl Albert Weber was tasting some mozzarella cheese of this water buffalo, I'm not sure. But those four figures are time stack that and olfactory crevice and biotop. And of course, to understand these relations and the model of the swamp, we need epigenetic landscape. The model of epigenetic landscape that is suggested by Waddington, which actually speaks that all the underlying structure is what it drives the surface, right? So when we look at in the swamp, perhaps we see some unarticulated mass, something that looks like a magma, something that doesn't have a shape, something that is in becoming. But precisely it is a perfect interface for us to understand relationships and interdependencies of Gaia. Swamp Observatory has the four figures, the olfactory crevice that can help us to understand that ear is not shapeless. Ear consists of so many constituencies, and in this case, we're traveling back with the help of Pete to reconstruct the smell of the extinct plants that were already non-existing even in the times of Karl Albert Weber. I think those visitors who would come to the space, even with a mask, I think they can be teleported 1,000 years ago. And also the time stack that goes down to 7,000 years, and also to bring all these troublesome, uncanny, traumatic memories and anxieties we have, and perhaps we inscribe into the environment. And also the biotope. So with this biotope project, we're working with a group of scientists, biologists, who been concentrated in the very defined territory, the critical zone of the swamp in Aukštumala, trying to register movements in time and space in the specific habitat. And these movements are constantly producing new traces and new drawings and the new images. And these images are becoming the image of the swamp. They're becoming the imagination of the swamp. But this imagination is not just speculative and not just biological. It is really entangled with the history. It is entangled with culture. It is entangled with biology, and it is also entangled with technology.
And last but not the least, a swamp game is coming soon.
So for us, swamp has become the future learning environment that helps us to engage the future, learn about the future, and also perhaps train for how can we adapt for the future. We see the pedagogical role of the swamp as the infrastructure and the environment. I don't think so that we have time to speak about the swamp game. I think there will be another launch.
I'm afraid we might actually slowly have to come to a close.
On December 12th, I think there will be a launch of the swamp game. And just to finish, I would like to read a quote by Henry David Thoreau. "Hope and the future for me are not in lawns and cultivated fields, not in towns and cities, but in the imperious and quaking swamps." Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Gediminas and Numida, for making swamps fruitful in so many inspiring ways. I think we don't have really time for a Q&A, but I want to share a few things. Hold on. So Mace said, "I love swamps." So thanks for that, Mace. And
well, then don't trade them.
And Andreas shares that he has grown up in the swamp, and there's another person at home, 100, who shares that he or she came from a swamp area. And I think the thought that I believe is this kind of, for me, tension between this kind of romantic also, I think you also mentioned it, metaphor of the swamp, and, you know, the draining of the swamp in the 19th century, and what you seem to promise, a kind of new age of the swamp, where the swamp has, you know, an agency beyond just metaphor again. At least that's how I heard you.
Excellent. Thank you.
Thank you.
So please stay with us until Moritz gives the okay for us to leave this room. In the meantime, it's my honor to close this section on habitat, and we will close with the performance itself as other training, Smartphone 2 by Vivian Tauchmann. a series of performances, invites us to get involved, so I really encourage you to get in gear to join her performance at home. After the performance and before we take on the economy, we'll have a 45-minute break, or maybe now a bit shorter, during which we will listen to an exclusive audio mix by Yannick Schütte. And now, Moritz, you could take us to Vivian.
I will do. Bye-bye, take care.
Wherever you are at the moment, I would like to ask you to sit down, preferably on a chair. For the next couple of minutes, I want you to move your body by following my movements and the instructions.
Sit down. Move hands to the front. Grasp. Move hands back. Move hands to the side. Grasp. Move hands back. Stretch thumbs out. While moving one hand slightly forward and one hand slightly backwards. Press. Reverse one hand slightly forwards and one hand slightly backwards. Press. Grasp using your fingertips. Move hands to the front. Grasp. Move hands back. Move hands to the side. Grasp. Move hands back. Stretch thumbs out. While moving one hand slightly forward and one hand slightly backwards. Press. Reverse one hand slightly forwards and one hand slightly backwards. Press. Grasp using your fingertips. Move hands to the front. Repeat continuously.
Focus on your movement. Try to still be precise with the movements. Slowly stop to move and look at your screen.